Welcome back, everybody, to episode 6 of Songsmith. On today's episode, we'll be talking about how to get past the wall in songwriting so you can overcome the difficulties of not being able to come up with ideas or lyrics for your music. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Songsmith. I'm your host, Keaton Williamson, and my goal is to help equip you to be the best musician you can be. The purpose of this show is to give you the knowledge it takes to be a successful songwriter, producer, and indie artist, while also honoring God in whatever music you create. We all want to be successful in this crowded space, so join me as we explore what it takes to be a songsmith. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of Songsmith. Like I said at the beginning, episode 6 is going to be talking about how we can get past the wall in songwriting, because a lot of times, we have the difficulty of we sit down, we're going to write, we're like, yes, and then nothing comes to us. We have such a hard time writing something down or whatever that may be. This is really a huge difficulty for a lot of people I know, including myself. Just about any songwriter, any creative really can relate to this when they go to do something and then when they actually sit down to do it, nothing comes to them. Small caveat or side note before we get started. In this episode, I'm trying a new microphone that I got for my birthday a couple weeks ago. It's a dynamic microphone, so it should hopefully not pick up as much of the noise like the heater that's in this room and whatnot, which that should be really nice. And I'm also using headphones for the first time that I also got for my birthday, so I'll be able to monitor the audio in real time, and if there's an issue or whatever, I can fix that without finding out once it's time to edit the show. So that's really cool, and can't wait to see how this hopefully helps improve the audio quality of the show. But back to the topic of the episode. So what is a writer's block, the wall? It's kind of like this point when you sit down to do something, or even if you haven't sat down to do something, and nothing comes to you. You feel like you have no ideas, no creative energy left, and you don't know what to make. You might even have ideas. You're like, I want to make this, but when you actually try to do it, you either can't come up with anything or you don't feel satisfied with what you're making. Obviously, this can happen a lot of times through lack of motivation, exhaustion, or just, stress and whatnot throughout the week. So I'm going to break down a couple of these different things that kind of come up, in your life, and explain from my experience and what I do know on how you can get past these things so you can hopefully continue to write songs, continue to be creative, and not always feel drained or feel like you're writing stuff half-heartedly. A lot of times, writer's block comes from a tired or stressed feeling life. If you have been going for weeks on end, or just a really long week or a really long day, if at the evening time you go to sit down and write something, you might just be too tired to actually think through stuff, which is, relatable. A lot of people, if you're tired, it's harder to think and do stuff creatively. You just kind of want to kick back and relax. It can also be induced by stress, because if you have tons of things you're thinking about you have to get done, it's hard to stay focused on what the task at hand is, which is, in our case, writing a song. Between stress, anxiety, and tiredness, it can really crowd our brain with a lot of different things we're thinking about, like, I have to do this, I have to do school, I have to do work, and then you just can't focus on what you're trying to write, like a meaningful song. It might either, kind of come out with lyrics that don't really sound genuine or real, or you might just, again, not be able to write anything. One of the ways to combat this is, first off, if you are tired, try and set aside a time earlier in the day when you're not as exhausted. I know this is hard with our busy lives, but if you can set up a time, maybe midday or in the morning, that you can actually sit down to write, or a day where you're not as busy, that will help you so much. When you don't feel like, oh, I have to move on to this next thing, or it's the end of the day and you're like, oh, I'm so tired, I can't do this now. And then it's just this repeated cycle of get up, do work, do school, relax, because you have no more energy left. By really setting up those times and being intentional about it, you can be like, okay, I have X amount of time. Maybe you set aside an hour and a half to sit down and write, and know you don't have to do anything until that time is up. So you have time to work, time to think creatively, and not feel like, oh, the longer I wait, the more I have to do. So scheduling yourself out can really, really help. It might sound mundane or a little bit boring, but it pays off. You might still be thinking about the things you have, stressing you out or whatnot, but if you can really put as much emphasis on this time is for this specifically, I don't have to worry about anything else, then it really helps. And make sure not to make it where it's an escape from certain things you have to do in life. Set aside a time where it's not going to be conflicting with other things you have going on. so you can actually not just be avoiding things, but instead setting aside an extra amount of time to do things. Again, this could be later in the evening, it could be in the morning, whenever you feel most creative or like your brain is the most active and you're not extremely tired. If you wake up in the morning and you're super tired, then you might want to wait till later when you've woken up more. But if you feel exhausted at the end of the day from work and school, then trying to set it up in the earlier parts of the day, depending on how your schedules are, would help a lot. The next most infamous thing that keep us from writing songs: devices. Computers, phones, smartwatches, TVs, gaming consoles, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. This could merit like an entire podcast, and I know there are shows and YouTube channels that go into talking about the ramifications of having devices around you all the time. It's really, really bad for our attention span, for productivity, for not getting distracted, and obviously, all those things are pretty important when it comes to sitting down and writing a song. This is one of the big distractions that you can remove. You just have to make the effort to do it and be like, okay, I'm not touching these or I'm not using these. And that can be a little hard in today's age, especially when they could be huge, useful devices for writing and creating music. Just yesterday, at least yesterday at the time of this recording, I was writing a song last night, and I had my computer and I was using it to write songs. But normally I use the Notes app on my phone, but because I get all the notifications through my phone between text, Instagram, and everything else, it can sometimes get really distracting. Whereas with my computer, I use the Notes app again, so it's, synced between my devices through iCloud. But with my computer, the Notes app is like, separate. Computers, especially mine since it's older, take longer to open things. You don't get all the notifications. So it was like using devices to really help things, speed things up, but not jeopardizing my attention span by getting all these notifications. I get some texts on my computer and whatnot, but I can either turn that off or ignore them. So that was really refreshing. And I also hadn't written much in the evening up until that point. So that was really cool. And I felt more emotionally connected to the song, if that makes any sense. It was a nice way for me to relax and also feel productive. Back to the point, though, of devices and whatnot. Here's a couple things I would recommend. Putting your phone in another room or in a place where it's not easy to get to, then you're less likely to pick it up and use it. When you're writing down your lyrics, your chords, or whatever to your song, try and use a notebook. If it's not as big of a problem, you could do what I did, where it's a computer and you're typing it in on the Notes app. I think the Notes app is better than Google Docs or something for one specific reason. With Google Docs or whatever, you have, especially on a computer, you have Safari or Google Chrome open, which is a click away from opening a new tab and going to YouTube or Instagram or whatever. That could be a huge distraction. With the Notes app, you hit the plus button and you get a new empty note, which is obviously not as exciting as a YouTube video or Disney Plus or whatever. It's a good way to eliminate distractions and starting to go off on wrong tangents that, get you out of the zone or get you out of the creative space that you might be in when you first sat down. One of the ways that I've seen this talked about and exemplified much better than what I could do is through the book Atomic Habits. For school, we had to read that during our health class, and it has a ton of great information. Just to let you know, this episode or anything is not endorsed by Atomic Habits, but I'm going to go off a little bit on it because I think it's a really, really solid book, and it breaks down a lot of different ways on how you can break bad habits as well as build up new habits. The thing about a habit is not that you're supposed to think about it and make it really hard. Habits are things you don't think about. You do it without having to think through the action you're doing. He talks about things like habit stacking, where you take one habit that you're already doing and add something to it. So I make coffee every morning. I could add to the habit by saying, every time I make coffee, then I have to drink a glass of water right after that. That way, coffee is the trigger for drinking water. Obviously, you can use this in different ways, like every time you sit down to write, you first pray. That kind of thing. He goes into great detail about different habit building techniques and also how to break other habits, and I highly recommend either buying the book and reading it or going off and listening to the book through something like Hoopla or different streaming services. He also goes into great detail about how you can break bad habits with devices because, like I said before, they are a huge problem in today's modern society. Again, 100% recommend. Basically everything in that book I agree with. The only thing I don't really agree with is he's talking about evolution, which obviously Christians don't believe in evolution. But the things about modern and practical implications of habit building, I do agree with. Another good way to help keep you on track during songwriting and get past that wall of not being able to come up with good ideas or any ideas at all is by having someone who can either help keep you accountable or, better yet, you can work with and bounce off of. When you have somebody to work with, you are typically more engaged and more dedicated to stay on track. It's kind of like the idea if maybe you're at a coffee shop or something and you see everybody doing work. If you're sitting around watching YouTube videos, you tend to get self-conscious being like, "Oh, they're seeing me. They're all doing work, but I'm just watching videos." You then want to do more work instead of just, sitting around and being lazy. It's kind of that similar thing when you have one or more people working with you, getting off track seems less likely unless you're with people who you just goof off with. Then that's a problem. By getting those people who can help keep you accountable and work with you, that can help, again, keep you from getting distracted, as well as help you to produce even better song ideas. Another thing that isn't talked about as much, I feel like, but is really, really important is your overall health. When you're sitting down to write a song or whatever, and you have been eating bad a lot or you're not treating yourself right by laying around all the time and not being active, that can really mess with how you feel. You can feel more depressed or just overall tired because honestly, it's really, really important to eat healthy, to be active, to treat your body well because it's hard to do things when your body isn't working at full capacity. I don't know a ton in the field of what you should be eating or how to live specifically, but I can say a couple guidelines are don't eat tons of junk food and don't go eating tons of sugar or drinking all the sodas and stuff. Eat good amounts of protein and, drink plenty of water, eat vegetables, that kind of stuff, as well as to not be snacking all day because that can kind of mess with your body too. Try and stick to your three main meals and maybe a snack between lunch and dinner. Now, take everything I just said with a grain of salt. Like a lot of those are good things to apply, but don't, take it to heart and be like, this is what you must do because I'm by no means an expert or even very knowledgeable in that field. That's something I would really like to learn more about. But treating your body well, eating well, and exercising and being active, not just, sitting behind a desk all day doing music or podcasting or school, whatever it may be. Get into a sport, play games with your friends outside, whatever it may be, so that you can, your body is actually being used and that energy you have from eating well is also being used properly to keep your muscles in shape and whatnot, even if it's just like at the basic level of being active as a person. By being active, there's a lot of chemical things that go on in your brain and whatnot that can really help your mood, like dopamine release in healthy ways, not like excessive dopamine release from scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or whatever it may be, YouTube. Training yourself well really pays off in the long run because it helps you to stay more focused and helps you to feel more awake and attentive, as well as if you want to live long, treat your body well. I think a lot of us want to live a good, long, healthy life. Further research into that would definitely be something that would benefit just about anybody, regardless of if it's a songwriter or whatnot. Eating and treating your body well are important things in life. Something else that I've found and when talking to other people that really helps you get past that creative block, whether it's in songwriting, story writing, creating art in any form, is switch up your environment. For instance, if I'm sitting in my office day after day after day, I can start to kind of get into these habits or lulls where I just don't feel creative in there. So maybe going to a different room in the house or sitting on my bed in my bedroom instead. Like, for instance, the song Dear God I wrote a little while back, I switched it up by going downstairs and sitting at the piano to write the song instead of on my guitar or on my keyboard up in my room. Well, at that point, I didn't have my keyboard, but the idea is still there. Mixing up your surroundings to kind of give you something fresh to look at. Another thing that can also be like a tangent of this is switching what time of day you do. One of the reasons, like I said earlier, is you might be more tired at a certain point of the day or feel more creative at another point of the day, so choosing when would really help. But even if you have a time of day where you feel really creative but you just keep getting writer's block, then try a different time of day. Maybe you are a little bit more tired, but just give it a chance. Like I said, I wrote in the evening, which I hadn't really done before, but went really well. And so far, the song I think is coming together really well as one of my better songs. I think I always say that and then come back to it, and sometimes I'm like, no, this isn't great. But right now, I feel pretty good about it. Switching up the environment can just be a huge game changer. It's a small thing you can do, really, but it can be a game changer. And another thing, if you have access to more than one instrument, say you know how to play keyboard and guitar, those are like the easiest instruments to write songs on, but say you know how to write on both of them, and you always write on the guitar. Try mixing it up and play the keyboard or piano, whatever it may be, and see how maybe the sound of that is different and how it can kind of change how you're thinking about songwriting and maybe open up new ideas to you. You're like, oh, I didn't think about this because I was always on the guitar, but on the piano, I can hear this idea better. And I'm like, you know, more inspired by that. And that's personally what's happened to me. I've kind of switched from guitar to keyboard a little bit more recently because I was having some issues trying to come up with good ideas on guitar. Now, I still use the guitar plenty and also play the songs a lot on guitar, but playing on the keyboard as I'm writing and messing around different things is sometimes a little bit easier and has opened up some new avenues and new ideas for me to explore. You need to also be okay with failing. I'm sure you've heard this before, but failure is sometimes the best teacher. So if you sit down and you write something that's just, it's kind of trash or whatever, and you're like, this is not good, nobody would want to listen to that, finish it still. Get in the habit of finishing your music so that in those times when you have lulls, you don't get in the habit of, oh, this is bad, I'm not going to finish the song. Still finish it out, and then if you never want to touch it again, you don't have to. But getting in the practice of writing your entire song out, it doesn't necessarily have to be in one sitting, but don't take ages to do it either. Then, if the song really isn't that good and you come back later and you're like, I still don't like this, you have the song on the shelf, it's experience, and you can go back and rewrite a new song with that same idea. You could consider that first song the draft. There's a lot of artists that I know do this. Like, I listened to a podcast called What Else with Corey Mann, which I'll link that in the description of today's episode, but it's also on the recommended page on Spotify under my podcast. It's a podcast where Corey Mann, a local radio station host of Pulse FM, a Christian radio station, talks with mainstream Christian artists as well as a couple other people sprinkled in here and there. But I've heard several times before that they will sometimes go back and rewrite an entire song, maybe even 3 times, because the first or second version isn't really that good. But then they finally craft something that they're like, yes, this is what I wanted to say and this is how I wanted to say it. You're not going to get everything right the first try. Any artist you talk to will tell you that they've written, rewritten, and written again songs that they had ideas for before they finally came up with an idea that they actually liked, an actual song they liked. Or sometimes there's ideas you just abandoned because they're not good. You have those days or you have those ideas, but don't be afraid to try different things and experiment, because a lot of great things can come out of experiments, even though there might be a lot of failures. Isn't one great song worth the time it takes to write 9 other bad songs? I would say it is. If you obsess over having to have every single song be the perfect song, then most of the time you're not going to hit it because you're going to be just so obsessive about fixing this one thing until it's just like you kind of lost sight of the bigger picture. Finish the work you started and then go and write another song or tweak it later, because that's also okay. You can tweak songs. You can change the words. I did that on one of my songs, Through the Sea. The verses were really not great melodies, so then I went and redid the melodies and changed the words a little bit, and now I really like those verses. But to end my rambling, it's okay to write bad stuff. You can come back to it later or just try and redo it from the bottom up after you finish that first song, even if it's bad. Now it's time to recap everything that was in this episode. The topic was, how do you get over the wall in songwriting? And what I talked about is how there's a couple different things. You can remove distractions like different devices or different things that might be in your room or workspace that cause you to stop songwriting and maybe pick up the phone, pick up a book. Not many people pick up a book randomly when they're doing songs, but that kind of idea, things that distract you. Also, eating well and treating your body well so that when those times you come to sit down and write, you've been treating yourself in a good way by eating well, drinking lots of water, and exercising. Maybe find some sort of accountability partner or somebody that you can work with so that they can help keep you on track. And also choose somebody who's going to help keep you on track and not just get you more distracted because you two like to goof off or whatnot. Finally, it's okay to write bad ideas. Those bad ideas sometimes get shelved, but finish them and then come back and rewrite it or tweak it later. Don't get in the habit of writing and then not finishing what you started. The Songsmith challenge for this episode is to try and switch up your environment, like I was talking about. Write in a different room, or with a different instrument, or at a different time of day, or even try and write with somebody you haven't written before. Or if you haven't written with people, try and have somebody come write with you. Mix things up and see what can happen from that. Like I said, changing the things up for me a couple different times have produced some decent works and have also helped me get above that issue of having writer's block. I'd love to see where you normally write or where you've mixed up writing by going somewhere different for this challenge. So you can either, put it in your stories and then tag me, or send it to me over Instagram or through my email, Instagram @songsmithshow, or my email is songsmithshow@gmail.com. For any of the things I talked about today, between Atomic Habits or What Else with Corey Mann, I'll link those things in the description or show notes of today's episode, so you can go and check those out, maybe find the Amazon link to the book, or listen to it on some streaming platform. And you can go listen to What Else with Corey Mann on different streaming platforms using those links below this episode. If you don't know how to find show links, just search show links or how to find show links and then type in the platform that you're listening on, and you should be able to find a result on Google. I also want to say I have a lot of exciting things coming up in the next several episodes, between episode ideas, maybe a little bit more frequent posting with some bonus episodes. You didn't hear that from me, though. It's going to be a surprise. As well as some interesting guests I'd like to bring on the show, and talking about some of the music I've been making in a little bit more detail, maybe with some bonus episodes of that. All that stuff is coming soon, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. This has been episode 6, Getting Past the Wall. I'm your host, Keaton Williamson. Thanks so much for tuning in, and as always, keep writing.